Today, let's see how each state voted relative to the national popular vote in the 1968 election. We'll see if any states were bluer and voted to the left of the country, or if they were redder and voted to the right. So there's not going to be a spreadsheet, but we're going to take a look at the background. Let's pull up the 1968 election. Here, this was an open seat because Lyndon Johnson was not the nominee for re-election. Richard Nixon finished with 301 electoral votes. He carried 32 states, and that was worth 43.4% of the national popular vote. The loser for the Dems was Humphrey. He got 191 electoral votes out of 13 states plus D.C. That was worth 42.7%, so just a little bit behind Nixon. But this election also makes it a little bit more confusing because there was an independent candidate, George Wallace, officially listed here as an American independent. He actually did get 46 electoral votes and he carried 5 states. Nationally, that was worth 13.5%. So Wallace makes it more complicated. But in this video, we're just focused on the difference between the Democrat and the Republican. So the difference between Nixon and Humphrey is 43.4 minus 42.7. That comes out to a 0.7% advantage for Nixon. So any state that voted for Nixon by more than 0.7% is going to be relatively redder. Any state that voted for Nixon by less than 0.7% or for Humphrey, that is going to be relatively bluer. And George Wallace is kind of just going to be on the side here. The states that he won is still going to just be between Nixon and Humphrey. So let's get back onto the map. And the electoral votes here are from 1968. And we're going to use some shading here. The darkest colors are going to be an advantage of 10% or more. The very lightest colors are going to be under 1%. So we've got 4 levels of shading. So let's dive into that first state. Alphabetically, it's Alabama. And that was Wallace's home state. It was one of the 5 that he won. So we're not going to factor in his 65.9% of the vote. Instead, between the 2 National Party candidates, Hubert Humphrey was ahead. He got 18.7%. And Richard Nixon finished with 14. That's an advantage for Humphrey of 4.7. But the country voted in the opposite direction for Nixon by 7/10. So the difference between that 7/10 plus 4.7 for Humphrey comes out to Alabama voting relatively to the left of the country by 5.4%. So hopefully that makes sense. Now let's quickly go through the rest of these states. Alaska was relatively redder by 1.9. Arizona was about 10 times that at 19.1. Arkansas, another state won by Wallace that had the smallest relative percentage out of all the states, 0.3 for Humphrey. California, Nixon's home state, that was relatively redder by 2.4. Colorado more than that at 8.5. Connecticut was bluer by 5.9. Delaware redder at 2.8. Florida, same direction, 8.9. And Georgia also 2.9. Hawaii was way to the left at 21.8. Idaho was way to the right at 25.4. Illinois just a little bit to the right at 2.2. Also redder, it's Indiana at 11.6. Iowa, 11.5. Kansas, 19.4. And Kentucky, 5.4. Louisiana, same percentage of the other direction, 5.4. And more blue states are Maine at 10.9. Maryland, 2.4. Massachusetts, 30.8. Michigan, 7.4. Minnesota, Humphrey's home state at 13.2. And Mississippi, 10.2. Missouri had the smallest relative percentage out of all the states that Wallace did not win, coming in at 0.5% to the right. More states in that direction is Montana at 8.3. Nebraska had the highest red percentage out of all the states, coming in at 27.3. Nevada, 7.5, and the same in New Hampshire, 7.5. New Jersey, a little less at 1.4. New Mexico, a little more at 11.4. New York was relatively bluer at 6.2. Then more red states, it's North Carolina, 7.5. North Dakota, 17. Ohio, 1.5. Oklahoma, 15. And Oregon, 5.3. Then a couple of blue states, it's Pennsylvania, 4.3. And Rhode Island, that state had the highest relative percentage out of all the states. Even more than Humphrey's home state of Minnesota, it came in at 32.9% to the left. Then back toward the GOP, it's South Carolina, 7.8, South Dakota, 10.7, and Tennessee, 9.1. Then Texas was a little bit bluer at 1.9. Utah, way redder at 18.7. Vermont, moderately redder at 8.6. Virginia, double digits redder at 10.2. Washington came in mildly bluer at 2.8. Virginia higher at 9.5. Wisconsin was redder at 2.9. And Wyoming way redder at 19.6. Then it's Washington, D.C., super blue place coming in at 64.3% to the left. So after all that, we've got the final map. Again, George Wallace kind of complicates things just a little bit, but overall at the top, if we total up all the electoral votes, states that were more Republican came in at 314, more Democratic came in at 224. So Republicans with the win here. But overall, this map is totally unrecognizable from the one we're used to today. A lot of blue states are redder. A lot of modern red states are bluer. There's not a lot of consistency here. You've got Washington bluer, but Oregon is redder. Connecticut is bluer, but Delaware is redder. The Rust Belt states and the South were also also mixed. Of course, going back this far, you're going to have totally different dynamics at play in different voting coalitions. Plenty of states had realignments over these 7 decades. But without Lyndon Johnson running for re-election, the country this time was in the mood for some change. Nixon came in, he defeated Humphrey rather convincingly in the Electoral College. The popular vote was closer, but it was easy for many states to vote above or below that national popular vote margin for Nixon of 0.7%. So fascinating stuff here. The reasons behind why these states voted the way that they did is an entirely different video. But if you wanted to know the relative percentages in the 1968 presidential election, this is the map right here. So let me know in the comments, what 3 or 4 states jump out to you the most? Are you surprised by some of the blue states voting to the left and the red states voting to the right? What about George Wallace? Let me know anything you're taking a look at down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.